Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I thought I'd try something a little different and try to say something about the power and the importance of silence. Okay, so let me start with something the great writer Thomas Mann once said. He said, "Speech is civilization itself. The word preserves contact. It is silence which isolates us." Now, that speech helped to build culture and civilization surely seems right. I mean, after all, it's through language and through speaking to one another that we've been able to conserve knowledge and conserve it for future generations who then build on that and so advance to more complex stages of existence. And Mann also seems partially right when he says that silence can separate us. But I say partially because I think it's only a half-truth. What I don't think we often think about is how it is the absence of speech, the absence of sound, can function or serve to unite us. And not only that, but silence at the right time and in the right context can have all sorts of values and benefits. In our age of the proliferation of noise and distraction, I think it's really important to recognize these things, and that's why I want to talk about it. Okay, so let me begin by first saying something about how it is that silence can unite us. It can, in fact, unite us in so many different ways. So one way that it creates a bond is just the way that it allows us to appreciate another's presence. Obviously, sometimes words can be very intrusive and get in the way of just really settling in with another person and being in sync with them and cherishing them. But it's interesting because not only can silence connect us with those physically near to us, but actually silence can also bring us closer to those people in our lives who are further away or even no longer alive. That's to say, it's often only in silence that we think of and truly feel linked with those in our lives who live at a distance from us or who we haven't seen in a long time. And that includes those who have died. So you might say that silence gives us the space or the opportunity to bring them back, if only for a moment. And speaking of the deceased, silence not only gives us this access to our dead relatives and friends, but more broadly, it can create a link with past generations. In other words, silence can be a commemoration of sorts that establishes bonds with our past and with our traditions. Okay, so what else can silence do? How else can it serve to unite us? Well, here's one pretty obvious way. By sometimes holding back and not letting our words fly, especially during an intense moment with another person, we let the wound heal. In other words, sometimes keeping things unspoken can prove to be an important preventative medicine. Sometimes the less we say, the less we unnecessarily hurt other people. Okay, so what else? Well, here's a really important one. Silence can also have a revelatory function to it, one that opens us up to the sacred, or to the religious, or to unknown worlds or potentialities. Actually, here I'm reminded of of a great passage from the book of Kings in the Bible. Now, there we're told that one day Elijah was in the mountains searching for God. Then when a great wind came and split the mountain and rocks fell, it turned out that God was not in the wind. Then, when a fire came, God again was not inside the fire. And later, when an earthquake came, it turned out that God was not in the earthquake either. But then eventually, what happened is that a gentle whisper came, and all of a sudden God said, "Elijah, why are you here?" So, in other words, here, God only discloses himself through silence. But I guess my larger point is that sometimes we need to create a space for the sacred or for the numinous to reveal itself to us. And that's what whispers and silence do. In between all the noises and the splitting of mountains that punctuate our lives, whispers and silence can disclose to us forgotten and higher worlds. Like in music, it's not all about the notes. It's about the stops and the pauses in between them that often prove to be the main sources of revelation. Now, this is sometimes hard to understand because we live in a world of constant noise and also in one of chatter or babble, as Heidegger puts it, which blocks or distracts us from the most important things. But this is why silence is so important. Somewhat paradoxically, maybe, there's a heavy gravity to silence that pulls us down from the airy babble of the social world. Maybe it's why the wisdom seekers of the East tell us that often those who talk do not know, and those who know do not talk. And maybe it's why Nietzsche said that he admired Socrates both because of what he did say and what he did not. You know, it's interesting. Wittgenstein famously said that what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. Now, at first glance, this might seem a bit odd, considering that Wittgenstein, when he was writing this, was living in silence, facing some of Norway's most majestic fjords. So, is he saying by this that there's nothing to understand or to relate to in such moments? Well, no, I don't think so. I think that maybe what he's saying is that there are some things that are best communicated or expressed through silence. That to try to say something about them is to distort them. Or that silence can often be the optimal response to the limits of language's expressive powers. Or maybe he's saying something like this, that which is most meaningful requires the medium of silence to convey it. Actually, no, it seems to me that Plato had something similar in mind here. In one of his personal letters, he says that the kind of philosophical wisdom that he wants to impart to his pupils ultimately cannot be expressed, but it's more like a light that is kindled in a soul from the flame of another. Again, here the deepest knowledge is not something that can be put into words or poured into the mind of another. No, here education takes the form of revelation. Anyway, at the end of the day, maybe the best way of understanding silence is as both a kind of subtraction and a form of addition. It's a subtraction since it takes away and it declutters, but it's also an addition in that the more quiet you are, the more you hear, the more the world opens up to you in ways you hadn't imagined, sometimes revealing to you the most meaningful of things, like it did for Elijah. Okay, so the larger point so far has just been to suggest that silence can unite us, whether it's uniting us with those around us or with those who are no longer here, or uniting us with sacred realms. But, well, that said, now I want to briefly turn to some other really interesting aspects of the uses of silence. So, first of all, sometimes I don't think we realize or tend to notice how important silence is when it comes to things like music or storytelling or just speaking. And here I have in mind what one commentator has called intervening silence. This is the silence that punctuates or breaks up the sound around it. So, like that. Maybe another way to describe it is like this. It's about timing. This has to do with the pacing of things. Or if we're talking about music, it has to do in part with those brief moments of silence that serve to heighten the sound which follows from it. Actually, now that I think about it, it's not just intervening silence that's important in these sorts of cases. It's also silence that comes after or that terminates all sound. I mean, again, think about a good book or a great piece of music. What's often the case about a great work of art is that it ends when it does. Or to put it another way, that if its sound had continued any longer than it did, then that would have taken away from its power and its goodness. Great artworks, in other words, are partly defined by when it is they end, when it is their sound turns to silence. Actually, this sort of phenomenon isn't restricted to artworks. I mean, it can be applied to just everyday conversation. I mean, think about a joke that goes on a little too long, or a personal story that's being told to you that you can't see the ending to. When sound exceeds its appropriate boundaries, there's something being lost. So it's knowing when to stop talking. It's knowing when that appropriate terminus is that gives all the stories and jokes that we tell each other their expressive power. I don't know. Maybe I should take my cue and let silence speak right now.